Hey boys and girls, today this is what I have for you over here. Bags, and more bags. Yep. Well, at this rate, I could just imagine that the reason why Hasbro decided to go plasticless is probably because of people like me destroying the environment with all these bags. But really, this is how I actually store my loose pieces. So as you can see right over here, and yeah, I'm running out of bags. You know, this morning I just ran out of bags, so I decided when packing my son's lunch, I decided to throw a hot dog inside his backpack directly, and I don't think he's gonna have a little surprise, but no, I'm just kidding. But stupid jokes aside, the reason why I decided to have these loose pieces all out is because I want to address a question I've had before, and just to take you back, about 2 months ago, I was fortunate enough to be invited to Out of the Basement, a live stream with those guys. And by the way, if you guys haven't subscribed to them, please go support them. They're great. They actually not only managed to provide us with great news and reviews of these toys and great discussions, but more importantly, every Sunday they have a live stream, and they managed to create a community of collectors, and now everybody's on a first name basis. And this is great. This is something that's very hard to do. So give them big props. Please go and support them. And I was very, very fortunate to be invited to speak with them, and had a lot of fun. But anyways, during that live stream, there was one question that often comes up, and that is, which clone trooper body do I like to work with? And honestly, thinking back, I was fumbling. It's one of those questions funny. You know, when asked, I was like, yeah, of course, you know, I know. It's because and then I just couldn't articulate why or what. And then I realized to myself that I have to get organized, and I owe you guys actually a clearer answer. And in doing so, I decided to go through each and every figure type, and then go through the pros and cons of working with each of them. And also, I decided, as you see here, to take them all apart, to show you and discuss how easy it is to disassemble and reassemble them when making these customizations, working with these bodies. Because when you're working with these figures, the ability to take them apart is gonna be very advantageous to be able to isolate the parts, to handle them, to put them back together. You just do a much better job. However, this is something that I recently started doing, as in really taking them apart. And it's something that takes practice and also takes some guts, because you're essentially taking perfectly good figures like, you know, like Hawk over here, and you are completely just taking them apart and hope that nothing gets snapped and stuff. So what I want to do is I want to show you guys each figure type, and then be able to show you how far you could push them in terms of taking them apart, so that hopefully it will act as a guideline for you to be able to have more knowledge before you go into doing this. All right, but of course, disclaimer, please exercise common sense. These things, you know, each archetype has certain properties to them, but the figure you have in hand might be a different production or whatever. It comes in a different type of plastic, so I can't guarantee you it's going to be 100% that way. So please don't blame it on me. But I'll do my best, and also exercise safety, because you're going to be working with heat and hot water, and you know, and heat gun and stuff like that. So exercise common sense and just don't kill yourself over it. Okay. So, anyways, I'm going to get on with it. And then, yeah, the next step, I'm going to describe to you basically the different types of body types, and then also different properties, aesthetics, and articulation they have over here, and talk about the advantages and disadvantages. So, stay tuned, and this is going to be hopefully a great video. Okay, let's get started. From here on, I'm going to pre-record the rest of the way because otherwise I have a lot to cover, let's just put it this way. And if I remain focused and which I have a tendency to just kind of meander and stuff, then it's going to be a very long video. So here on go, there's going to be a lot of information, but hope I get the blast on through. So the most commonly used variants when people customize can be grouped into 5 broad categories. The original release, I'll call them Gen 1. Bootleg of the original release, or Bootleg Gen 1. Rex blind body, the new 2020 mold, and the bootleg of the 2020 mold. There are some variations of these body types, but I will try to address them as I go along. So first, I'll start with the original release, the Gen 1s. These are figures that start with blank white Phase 1 Trooper. Then the Phase 1 variants with the different colors, the plain Phase 2 Trooper, the Order 66 4-pack, and even Clone Wars General Kenobi figure, Commando Wolf, Commander Fox, Commander Gree, Commander Cody, and the Purge Trooper. Some of them have sculpt variants, but the important takeaway here is the mechanics of the joints uses the same principle. So the advantage of using this body is the proportion of the upper half of the figure are close to cinematic renditions, namely Revenge of the Sith and Attack of the Clones. For example, this distance from the top of the armor to the belt is shorter. The shoulder armor size is also accurate. But the cons are, most figures that utilizes this build is out of production, so they are hard to find. The articulation for these figures are notoriously limited. Particularly, the shoulders don't do shoulder fly well, and the elbows don't bend past 90 degrees. Finally, the joints connecting the top of the legs to the hips don't bend well. Also, the thigh armor is wonky. It has some major thigh gaps, and it is not uncommon for the legs to be gummy and unstable. They might warp over time. And number 4, some people are bugged by the visible pin joints. I personally am okay with this, but some people consider it an eyesore. So yeah, whatever. Next is a bootleg figures based on the Gen 1 original mold. They're otherwise known as Star Wars or AliExpress specials. As a figure, it has all the characteristics of the Hasbro originals except for a couple of differences. The pros of using these are, you could be very thorough when taking them apart, as I'll show you later. Similar to original Gen 1 release, they also have screen accurate upper torso. And last pro is they are accessible if you don't mind ordering from China, which can take a while, but once you get used to it, it's fine. Cons are, they possess all of the shortcomings of the original release. The plastics they use is inferior. You don't really notice it much, but using a magnifying glass, the material used here is more porous, because whereas the other releases have a difference of a harder material for the torso and softer material for the limbs and the heads, this one has soft material everywhere. But this also makes it very easy to take apart. The joints between the top and bottom torso over here also has a very huge gap, which is a little bit weird. But the bright side is that as better articulation, I guess, a better stomach crunch. Okay, so moving on, the third body type is the Rex Bly variant. This variant can be seen on Captain Rex, Commander Bly, and recently, Jet Trooper and Clone Pilot Hawk. Of course, the latter two have different neck attachments, which is derived from the new 2020 mold. Hawk also has a square indent on the chest to receive the pilot chest box. It also has no line going down the center of the chest. The Jet Trooper has a hole on the back to fit the backpack. Many people think this body is the perfect balance. And the pros of using this body are, it retains the movie accurate proportions as mentioned in the original mold. but it also fixes some articulation problems, such as the elbows, where it can now bend way past 90 degrees, and the shoulders can shoulder fly much better, because now the shoulders armor can slip underneath the torso. In fact, its range of articulation is arguably the best out of all the molds we covered in this video. The thigh gap I've mentioned previously has also been remedied, so you no longer can pass a bus through it. It just looks more natural. The cons are, there are visible pin joints similar to the original mold, and it can be a con if that irks you. The pin joints are also more difficult to take apart if you want to fully take them apart at the elbow and the knees. Then you have the new 2020 mold. This new mold made some progress on some areas but regressed in others. For one, the joints are now hidden, so it's more aesthetically pleasing, I guess. They are super easy to take apart. Really easy. The shoulders can splay out as far as the Rex blind body, but in here it's because the shoulder armor is flexible and can slip over above the torso instead of into the torso armor. And this is good for articulation, but I argue that is kind of weird looking. Then there is a slight butterfly joint in the shoulder. I guess it helps a bit with the articulation. The leg can render a better sitting position, albeit you have to twist the top and the knees, but it can be done, and this range is advantageous for troopers that require a sitting position, such as my ATRT driver here. And speaking of legs, this time it is even more realistic than the Rex blind body. They look even more like a man wearing armor because it's even slightly bigger. The cons are the elbow and the knee pads are stuck to the armor above, respectively, and in some cases it causes strain on the plastics when bending. And for the next issue, I consider them as negatives. Although, for some of you, it might be a pro. For one, the shoulders are way too small, but that's because I prefer the live action look. For those of you who likes the animated look, it might just be just fine. The torso to the belt proportion is also a minus for me, where the torso looks stretched out because the distance from here to here is elongated. Again, some is okay with it because it helps with articulation, and incidentally, not only does it look more like the animation, but you notice that even in the Battlefront 2 models that they use, it has the same distance for the torso. Then lastly is the bootleg of the 2020 mold. I group this and the 2020 mold together because the bootlegs here mimics the Hasbro original so much closer than they did for the Gen 1 body type. So I'm not really going to cover that, but the only difference here is that I think that the shoulder armor here actually has more oomph to it than let's just say the Camino Trooper or the 332nd release from the Hasbro. So I actually like these aesthetically even better than the legit Hasbro 2020 mold. Now that I got the functional and aesthetic qualities out of the way, we also have to have a look at how they disassemble and reassemble. The easier they reassemble, I guess the better it is for you psychologically, because yeah, it's a pain when the pin joints just don't want to line up and snap together, right? So before I start, I want to quickly touch on how I disassemble them. Some people use heat guns. I cannot comment because I don't own one, but I've used hair dry before and it works fine, although I feel like the heat that it results from it is not very even. But the method I usually use is boiling hot water. Oftentimes, some hot water from a thermal pot would do just fine. For the tougher parts that requires more heat, I would either use the thermal pot to reboil the water and then use the water fresh off the reboil, or an actual cooking pot. In these cases, I will get the water into the mug and work from there. The hot water will sufficiently be hot for a while, and it probably should last you about 5 minutes of working time, which is good. Now, if that's still not hot enough, and sometimes I encounter pieces that are very stubborn, I will actually submerge the part in the cooking pot while it's still boiling. Make sure your parts don't touch the actual pot because it will melt the plastic. So instead, use the perforated ladle, ideally plastic ones too. I didn't run into any problems using this. And finally, after a good soak, always pat them with paper towel before you stick your finger in there, because sometimes the water just leak out of nowhere from the crevices, and it just ends up singeing my fingers, which hurts like a lot. That said, let's move on to some demolition, shall we? I'll start in the same order as the way I introduced them. So for the Gen 1 body, I will use Commander Wolf to demonstrate. My apologies, I took the shoulders off already because I used it for the Sergeant Hound custom. But you get a good idea anyways, right? The Gen 1 body is one of the hardest to take apart, the other ones being Bly and Rex. The difficulty will only apply though if you want to take them apart at the elbow and the knees. If not, it's not particularly hard. The elbows and knees are the ones that are just a bit of a pain and need tools to do it, and need a bit of luck sometimes. One thing of note though is the legs to the hip joint does not disengage because it's made with hard plastic. So no matter how hot you heat it, it doesn't come off. So just leave it there and you will have to work around it. And speaking of hard plastic, the torso is made from hard plastic as well, so you cannot detach the upper and lower torso. You notice almost all figures like this. I have separated them before, but I have major problems reattaching them. And unless if you want to grind the hole larger, I would say it's best just to leave it alone, just work around it. Also, the elbows and knees, some figures in this category have lopsided pins, where one side is larger than the other. This is something you'll have to really pay attention to when putting it back together. Now, for the Gen 1 bootleg, the advantage of this figure is that you can completely take it apart. This is the only figure where you can separate the top and bottom torso, because the upper torso is also made from the same type of soft plastic as the rest of the figure. You will also notice that the leg to hip attachment is positioned differently, whereas all the other figures have a male ball joint jut out from the crotch. Here, the male ball joint comes from the leg, and there is a rotation here that swivels like so. As for the pin, unlike some figures in the original Gen 1, they are symmetrical, so you don't have to especially keep track of which side is which when reassembling the figure. Next, you have here the Rex and Bly body. Because the torso is hard plastic, it doesn't come apart at the torso. I tried to do it once, and after almost breaking the damn thing, I succeeded. But I couldn't put it back together unless I enlarged the hole in the lower torso. I decided to just keep it here just to show you guys what it's like, and probably not a good idea to do it. Similarly, the hard plastic means the shoulder joints cannot detach. So these two areas you will have to work around when painting. For the neck, I have cracked this area several times because I did not heat the head long enough. So please make sure you do, and make sure that the head is nice and squishy and soft, and you should get it out with very little resistance. The figure also features hard plastic for the legs to hip joint, so this one has to stay in. Again, just work around it, masking tape it, paint around it, whatever, it's fine. The pins are also symmetrical, so no need to keep track of them when reassembling. Lastly, I have to let you guys know, Commander Bly and Clone Pilot Hawk and even the Jet Trooper, some of the recent figures like the Commander Bly reissue have this problem, is that for the shin armor, the lower leg, it's actually swapped, like left is right, right is left. So when working with this, most likely you will want to fix this, because it's very awkward. It's one of these things where once it's seen, you cannot unsee. So this is something that you have to be very mindful of. I've done a figure once where I have where the paint scheme is not symmetrical, and it's not until when I reassemble it do I realize that, oh crap, they're actually supposed to be swapped, and I have to repaint the entire lower leg. So just pay attention to that. And another note, which is not a huge deal, but in the Jet Trooper and the Clone Pilot Hawk, the neck joint utilizes the same parts as 2020 mold, which is cool. Okay, so then we have the last two categories, the new 2020 mold and its bootleg. As I said before, they're mechanically identical, so I'll cover them both at once. As much as I have an issue with the aesthetics and some functions of the new mold, I have to say this figure is super simple to take apart and is really beginning to grow on me. The neck comes in several pieces, the neck and the dumbbell joint. Now, when you first heat this part up, most likely you will detach the head, and the dumbbell joint usually will be attached to the head and disengaged from the neck. Now, in order to take it out of the head, make sure that one, you heat the head sufficiently so it's soft enough for it to let go of the ball joint. And second of all, you probably will need to use a tool to pull out the dumbbell joint, but don't squeeze on a joint or you would easily pinch the plastic and make the stem susceptible to snapping. Instead, just close the plier enough so that it catches the ball of the bottom, but don't squeeze. Just pull on it in a opposite direction and do it carefully, and it should come out easily. The shoulders can also come apart pretty easily, provided you heat the torso sufficiently. Keep one thumb jammed in there like this, and when you hold the torso, and then you peel it away upwards. Do realize that when it's heated, the shoulder fly joint inside the torso, it's going to be very, very soft. Don't be afraid. It never broke on me, but you know, again, if you keep your thumb against it while you peel the other side away, it should be okay. The elbow and knee joints are no longer pin joints. Instead, they're single joints that has a male part like this. They are generally easy to take out when heated. Now, the knee, the elbow, and the shoulder armor is glued on. Some people like to cut them out. I tend to leave them alone and work around them. It's fine. Lastly, the leg to the hip joints are generally soft plastic, and with sufficient heat, it should be soft enough to pry them out like this. So what is the conclusion? Which body do I like to use? Nowadays, I would either use the Bly or Bootleg 2020 mold. Aesthetically, I like their proportions the best. And strangely, the Bootleg clones have slightly better shoulder pads, as I said before, than the Hasbro counterpart. Especially in places where I have pauldrons or some additional shoulder pads that actually cover up the shoulder pads. I'm okay with it, and it's starting to grow on me. I used to use the Gen 1 bootlegs a lot, but I've grown to not like their lower proportion as much. The pore surface quality also is a big minus for me. But now and then I'll use them for something like the Commandos, which has the majority of the body covered up anyways, and I need the figure to be easily taken apart at the mid-torso. Other than that, it all depends on availability and certain characteristics such as what I wish to do with them. For example, I used the Purge Trooper several times to make customs where the end color scheme are predominantly black, while I am planning on a clone pilot figure and will most likely recycle Hawk's chest box, so it'll be convenient for me to use that body. I use Commander Cody for my Captain Vaughn custom for obvious reasons. I used a Camino Trooper for Sergeant Hound because the paint scheme is halfway there already. So you get the idea, right? And Bly, I use it a lot because right now it just seems to be so much abundance of Bly in my area. I don't know why. And they're being sold for a pretty good price. So I have like 5 to 10 of them like just lying around. So I use Bly a lot too. So the short answer again is usually the Bly Rex variant or the 2020 mold bootleg, unless there's a compelling reason for me to do so otherwise. So I hope this video is helpful. Again, it is rather long, but I feel it's necessary to be more thorough. Please feel free to ask me any questions in the comment section, and as usual, I'll probably write an essay just to answer you. Well, until next time, happy customizing.